Gary and I have been working on multiple projects today. I was cleaning the truck, or at least the first part of the truck, and Gary has been having a great time working on the stab legs.
Jacks.
Oh, stab jacks?
Jacks.
Jacks, not legs?
Yeah.
Jacks.
It's legs.
Legs?
Legs. After about, 4 or 5 years, our jacks, the seals and everything have started to deteriorate. What I'm going to do is take you through what I did to take one of these apart. What you'll need to take this apart is a 5/32 Allen wrench, and you'll need a 3/16 inch Allen wrench. And then you also have 2 screws here at the very bottom of the motor housing. You're going to need a long place to work. The seals I'm going to replace are this one and the one at the very bottom. But once you get those bolts loose, there is a seal that's going to pop out. When you go to put it together, you want to make sure that seal is in there. So I'm going to set this aside just for right now. I'm going to work with this piece first. So you break these loose, or I should say just loosen these. I hate the word break because break means you're going to have to fix it. So, and just so you can kind of see inside there, this is what it looks like prior to taking it out. Next step is to take the rod out, the ball screw. So I've got all 4 screws out. And what you're going to do is just slide this tube off. It does come off rather hard when it gets to the end. So when it gets up to this point, it gets a little more challenging. You got to get it lined up with this groove. What I'm talking about is this piece here needs to line up with that groove at the very bottom. Otherwise it will not come out. I thought I had it lined up, but evidently I did not. So once you get it all lined up, it just slides off that easily. So this is why I'm replacing those seals. As you can see, it's kind of torn up. So that's allowing dirt to get inside here. And what's happening is I'm getting a bunch of pitting and a bunch of wear. But if you keep getting dirt up in there, it sits up on top of that seal. It won't work well. This is kind of what the 2 parts look like. So I've got the rod. This is the ball screw part of it. This is the motor part of it. Turns pretty easy. I didn't take this apart on my first one. I didn't see a need to. These bearings feel pretty good. So I didn't mess with that at all. A little bit of rust here, so I'll probably just take that off and then I'll coat that with some grease. All right, so I'm going to get this cleaned up. You know, of course, do the snap finger thing because that's what everybody does, right? Just like that, it's cleaned up, ready to go. Just kidding. You can kind of see the pitting on the rod here, so I'm going to have to get this cleaned up a little bit. Don't want to have to buy another jack because they're not exactly cheap. All right, so I put a little bit of PB Blaster on there, and what I'm doing is I'm just gently scrubbing some of the rust and some of the dirt off. It's kind of like wet sanding. It helps keep it smooth, and it helps get the rust off, and that way it doesn't strip off a lot. Sandpaper leaves a lot of grooves, and the lubricant helps keep so that you don't take quite as much off, and it also helps get rid of some of the rust areas. I've got the tube all cleaned up. What I'm going to do then is put the shaft together. What I'm going to do first though is grease this well. I'm using I guess an automotive grease. It's called Durablend. It's a synthetic blend grease, and it's for excellent high and low temperatures. It seemed like the same viscosity of what I took out of there. It also had a little bit of moly in it. See if I can help protect it. What I'm going to do is smear it a little bit onto the exposed ball screw. So everywhere there was grease, I'm putting some more grease on. Alright, so what I did on the last one is I put this on tube first. It goes with the small side down. It's like a grease wiper seal, I guess you'd call it. So you kind of just slide it over this. And yeah, I should have not greased it before I did that, but that's alright. So I found it easier than putting this on the tube first. I found it easier to do it this way, and then you can just line up the groove here and then slide it down the tube. And what you're gonna do is feed this end. So this end with the notch right here, we're gonna run it with that slot. We're gonna put it over that slot first, and then we're gonna line up the slot with that slot in the shaft. And I do have quite a bit of play in there. And I just use a little screwdriver. We're just going to line up the screw holes. We're going to put these screws in this way. So they actually thread into the housing. This screw actually has a stop to keep that from spinning. So just enough to get these started. Alright, then I just go around and I snug them all up, and then I'll go around and tighten them. What I noticed is they originally looked like they had a little bit of glue on there. So what I'm going to do is just smear a little bit of silicone on there. Alright, so that looks like it. It came off easy, so I'm assuming that they just put a light something on there. That looks like it. Alright, so we're going to take the motor apart. What I'm going to do is watch for that seal that's in there for the pipe. But I got to replace this seal. As you can see, they're kind of shot. So I'll take the two screws, one, two out of the bottom. This is where it gets to be a little bit of a challenge. So just give it a good twist like a can. That seal should pop open. What you want to do is just take your screwdriver, just a flat blade screwdriver, and see if you can work it up all the way around. You don't want to reef on that just like plastic. So pushing too hard. What it's doing is it's got to slide over the motor housing. It's not a simple process. It looks like it would be, but it is not. So what I might do is just put a little bit of penetrating oil on there. I don't know if it'll work or not. As you can see, that PB blaster, once you get it worked in, helps that seal come off quite easily. There. Too big. So I'm using a 5/32 Allen wrench. So knock those out. And since I had to take this all apart anyway, I'm just doing it off the camper. You might be able to sneak it off on the camper to grease this. Then what you're going to do is pull this cover off. And you'll see the inside, you got your gears. You don't want to flip this over because they are sitting in there loosely. So what I'll do is pull them out. I think a lot of people have had issues with these clips here. Breaking. I have not had that issue. It looks like they siliconed everything in. So it appears to me like that's okay. These are sitting on the edge, but just giving them a snug-a-dug here. Doesn't feel like they're loose in those, so I'm not going to mess with them. What I found is this gear just tips up fairly easily, and then I'll get that cleaned up. Now I'm not going to take this out of here because then I got to take that drive pin out. But what I'm going to do is just make sure it spins freely. Check that underneath there. I'm not sure if that was the clutch part. So rather than take all of this apart, I don't really feel like trying to drive that pin out. I'm just going to hand clean everything, get all of the old grease out and put some new grease in, and just coat everything with a good slathering of grease. I worked the grease into all of the gears, especially the bevel gears here. So then all you do for this one is you got to get the gear into place, and you can kind of tell when it's in place because you'll get both of these things to spin at the same time. And it's all the way down on that bushing there. The one thing you do have to watch out for is there's a seal that goes around this outside edge. You want to be very gentle with it. You just kind of lay this seal in here. So you want it to get it so there's no twists or anything in there. And then you'll put this cover on. There's two dowel pins here to help you line it up, so it makes it pretty user friendly. And just carefully lay that on here. And then just press it down, and holding it together, turn it upside down. That seal wants to push out, so what I'm doing is just gently clamping it down in a crisscross fashion like this. The seal will squash if you get it too tight, so you don't want to over tighten these. Off camera, basically I was fighting that seal. So what I did was I took the seal out, laid it out on the table, and replaced it back up there because it's already got a form. So I'm guessing that's why it's not acting right. Again, don't over tighten. They'll squash out the seal in a heartbeat. So just snug it up. Alright, so I'm done. You can see the seals all the way in. So you got the seal all the way around, nothing's bulging out, everything is tight, so we should be good there. We're replacing these seals on the bottom of this. What this does is it fits into a groove, and so you got to kind of work it on. It does not come off easily. It does catch on the inside groove, so it's kind of like a oil can seal. So I take some of this 3-in-1 rubber conditioner, and I put a little bit on a paper towel. So I just put a little toot. That way I have it all conditioned. So then what I'm doing is I'm just going to put a little coating on this just to kind of make it easier to put that seal over. And then, so what I do is I just kind of work this down, and you see how much easier it goes on with that lubricant on there. And then put your screws back in. Since I'm using this rubber lubricant here, I'm going to just put a little bit on this seal since it's a nice rubber seal. Okay, so all I did was put that seal in. You can kind of see it right there. So you just kind of, there's like a ledge in there, so you just kind of get that seal in there. They put a little bit of grease on the end, so I put a little bit of grease on there as well. I'm just going to put some extra grease here. I don't know if it's needed or not, but put a little extra grease there. And we should be good. Now what I'm going to do, this is rather heavy, so be careful. So as you're doing this, you should have all 3 screws in. They should just be out so that you keep them retained. So what you want to do is make sure it gets seated. Oh, maybe I got it seated the first time. Well, no. I spun it in the right direction, got it seated. There's indentations where the old one was, so I kind of just get it lined up with those. Once I get it back up on the coach, I will try it out. Completed leg, it's a little dirty yet. I'll clean it up before I install it, but as you can kind of see, all set to go. Yeah, so I'm working on getting the bracketry out. This is inside the camper. This piece sits in here like this. It's screwed in with 2 screws. You can kind of see them sticking out here. You'll have to dig around for them. And then that piece comes off, and I already got one of the screws off. And then you can see how rusted these get, so they come off a little bit difficult. These wires here for the lighting on the slides and for the power to the legs, so you may want to check these wires, make sure they're good. I'm going to get rid of these and replace them with stainless, because obviously these are pretty rusted. And then I'll show you the other side outside in just a minute. Alright, you saw me taking the bolts off from the inside. This is what they look like on the outside. This is why I'm replacing a lot of this. We got a lot of corrosion, rust stuff coming in on these, so I'm going to replace these all with stainless steel. So I'm just using a 3/8" socket on my ratchet head. Now I'm going to go really slow. These will be the first time I've had these out, and from past experience you do not want to break these. So take your time taking these out. If they get stuck, just keep working them. I did not replace any of these. They don't seem to be bad off. They're not rusting. So didn't replace those, and these pinch nuts seem to be in fairly good shape as well. So one of the big tricks I've done in the past, if I do have one that gets stuck, is to tap it gently with a hammer, see if you can break it loose. Usually it's just corrosion on the back and the threads. So what I'm trying to do is gently pry in here. You can kind of hear it. They got a little bit of silicone or something like that behind here. So I just try to loosen it really slowly. And of course that's what I get to put up with. Crazy woman.
Isn't that cool?
You're crazy. So what you're going to see is I've worked along using the small bed blow hammer and then just this really narrow chisel, and I've worked it between the fiberglass housing there, and you just work the caulk loose. Because you're right up on this piece here, so you really can't get much in there, so you got to kind of work from the inside out. This is kind of what it looks like with that other plate off. You don't want to get behind here and pry it off, because sometimes they are going to get delaminated, like mine is a little delaminated back there. So now I've got to try to get this one off. This is the corner. This one has seen a little bit of water, and I've had a water issue somewhere. I have not been able to find it. That comes down through this trough right here, so I left that trough uncovered. As you can see, these screws are rather rusted as well, so that's been leaking at the screws. Well, this is made of rubber. You want to be very careful when using a putty knife to get behind there to loosen it up. They did use beetle tape behind here to seal the hole where the electrical is. I will redo that and then re-caulk around it. What that looks like behind there. This has been leaking as well because all the beetle tape is gone. It's just really hard. So I'm just going to clean all that beetle tape off and redo it. So what I'm using to install this and get a sealant behind here is Geoflex RV. I just have a different tube of it, but it's the same stuff. And all I'm doing is just spreading some around the perimeter. So as you can see, it kind of got these all cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is just set one of these screws in here just to help me hold it. So I'm putting stainless steel carriage bolts, but what I'm also doing is putting a little sealant behind them. Alright, so what I'm going to do is repeat that process all the way around. So one of the things that I didn't do correctly is this plate should go on second, the one with the right angle on it should go on last, because you got to squeeze those together. So what I found is these screws here seem to do most of the load. They're screwed into metal. These here on the outside, the only place they're screwed into metal, but they're sandwiched in between a styrofoam layer and wood. There's no metal behind mine. I think Host may have changed this, but we're going to have maybe Dan Pennington look at that to strengthen this up, because there's really nothing behind these holes to pinch it. So if I get it too tight, it'll actually pinch it and start to bend the fiberglass. But yeah, so these seem to be holding most of the load, so I want to make sure that those get good and tight and also sealed, because the rust is a factor and there's been water intrusion in there in the past. So I'm losing my daylight. What I'm going to do is get these screws set in. I'm just going to temporarily put this in for right now. I'll need to get that cleaned up, but tomorrow we'll finish up the rest of this. So, alright, we'll see you then.